Okay, good morning everyone. So we're going to continue our discussion about the difference between the strategic formulation process and the strategic implementation process. So first, we're going to discuss what is a strategic formulation process. So we have already been learned about the strategic formulation process from our previous lessons in module 1 and 2. So basically, the formulation process focuses on the effectiveness of a particular strategy on your organization. So in other words, it entails what are the specific strategies that are being suitable, being applicable on your specific organizational situation or context. In contrast, strategic implementation practically focuses on efficiency. In other words, uh, is this particular the implementation of particular strategy entails that particular resources such as the human resource, finances, capital, equipment, machinery, and other tangible assets are being used efficiently so that your particular organizational objectives are being met using a limited amount of resources of your respective organization or not. In other words, sa layman's term pa, kung mag-implement na gani ka sa imong strategy, if you're going to implement on your strategy, kinahanglan ba nimo og daghan kaayo nimong resources, daghan ba nimong capital, daghan ba equipment, machinery sa imuhang operations, say for example, para ma-attain lang nimo tong specific organizational objective that you have set for your respective organization. So that's it. Next is on strategic formulation process. It primarily focuses on the intellectual process. Intellectual process practically because you're going to scan, you're going to analyze, you're going to interpret all the factors that are being considered that has an influence or an impact on your organization. Say for example, in your SWOT analysis, sa inyong PESEL analysis, for example, political factor, what are specific regulations na gina-implement sa atong government on your specific industry that might affect or have an impact on your organization, an impact on your operations, say for example, economic factors, say for example, how does the COVID-19 pandemic and the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent recession that is happening affect or influence the purchasing power of your target market. The social factors, say for example, how does the behavior of your target market influences their buying pattern or their purchase behavior, stuff like that. So in other words, I'm going to analyze, interpret those specific factors, and therefore it practically entails the intellectual process in analyzing those specific factors. Next, in terms of implementation, it practically focuses on operational process. So in other words, when you say operational process, it practically relates to efficiency. In other words, operations, how does you operate, how does you implement or execute those formulations that has been identified and formulated on your specific organization. Say for example, in your specific organization, sa inyong operations, you have set a particular inventory policy sa inyong operations. For example, dapat na kay 10% inventory sa inyong raw materials or work in process or your finished products because you want to attain that efficient inventory level so that you will not be hampered by too much inventory cost or the potential loss of sales because of no inventory at all. So basically, that particular policy or formulated policy is being implemented on an operational efficiency perspective. In other words, in layman's term pa, kung kana bang imuhang policy or formulation na gi-formulate, gi-implement nimo on your respective departments, on your respective organization, will become effective if you're going to operate it or implement it efficiently in your respective organization. Next, the formulation process requires good intuitive and analytical skills. So it is also related to the intellectual process. So basically, that particular intuitive and analytical skills that is being implemented in your respective organization uh, entails that you are going to analyze a specific environmental scanning in your respective organization. Next, the implementation process. Implementation process requires special motivational and leadership skills because basically you're going to motivate, you're going to have this to guide, to develop your specific colleagues or your team members or your subordinates to practice, to execute those strategies that has been formulated by the top executive or the executive management. So if you're not going to motivate them, if you are a leader who doesn't have that particular leadership skills in you, so therefore your subordinates or your colleague will not have the enthusiasm or the engagement or the encouragement to practically implement or execute or practice the strategies that has been formulated by the top executive or the executive management on all aspects of the organization regardless of organizational hierarchy, because technically the implementation process is the most tedious, is the most difficult process in the entire strategic management process framework. In other words, kung sa layman's term pa, sayon ra istoryahon lisod buhaton. So that's the difference between formulation and strategy. It's easier for you to formulate strategy. Moingon ka na, o kani buhatan ni buhatan na. But then, if in terms of implementation process, it's very difficult. And therefore, you need to motivate your organizational, your members or your colleagues, your team members to implement those formulated strategies at hand. Lastly, it requires coordination among few individuals because basically the strategic formulation process is basically concentrated on the top management or the executive management because they are the ones who are trying to formulate strategies, to analyze, to interpret what are specific factors that basically it has an impact or has an influence on the entire respective organization. If you're going to correlate it, to relate it in our, say for example, in our college, in our CBSC, the strategic formulation process only entails the top management. Let's say for example, sila ma'am college president, ang vice president for academic affairs, vice president for admin and finance, human resource, ang mga program heads, deans, program coordinators, ang ato ang student affairs coordinator and such things. We're going to formulate specific factors or specific strategies that will become suitable or become effective for the entire CBSC. So that's it. So kapag was na yung mga specific na mga policies or strategies that are going to be implemented, they are the ones who are trying to analyze or to interpret or to formulate those strategies in hand. In contrast, in terms of implementation, it requires coordination among many individuals. Because kapag, say for example, mag-implement na og specific policy or strategy, say for example, o dapat ang ato ang midterm exam is on this specific date only. So therefore, that particular policy or strategy is not only being concentrated on limited few personnel, but it involves a lot of individual concerns. Say for example, the students, the faculties, the registrar, and so on and so forth. So therefore, the implementation requires many individuals. So we have specific implementation activities at hand. So altering sales territories, adding new departments, closing facilities, hiring new employees, cost control procedures, modifying advertising strategies, and building new facilities. So these particular implementation activities are being anchored. In other words, it's being tailor-fit on what specific strategies that has been formulated. So see, for example, altering sales territories. Kapag ikaw magbuhat ka og market development na strategy, in other words, you're going to tap new territories in your as your target market. Say for example, kung imuhang imuhang particular na business has been concentrated sa Compostela only, but you want to expand your business as a part of your strategic initiative. So therefore, pwede na ka moadto sa New Bataan, pwede na ka moadto sa Malagusan, moadto na ka dito sa Moncayo, Monte Vista, Laak. So that's example of altering or expanding sales territories. Adding new departments. Say for example, pag once na daghan na kaayog specific departments are concerned, so therefore mag-add na ka, instead na isa lang imong accounting and finance, separate na nimo ang accounting, separate na nimo ang finance, because those specific sometimes those two specific departments are being combined, but because of you have been very specific on the job performance or the specific performance or objectives and goals na kailangan i-met for the accounting department, for the finance department. So therefore, kinahanglan na nimo siya i-separate into two. The same thing with the marketing and sales. Di ba? Sometimes ang marketing and sales na two are being combined into one. But you're going to separate the two. Lahi na ang marketing, lahi na po ang sales. Closing facilities, hiring new employees, cost control procedures, modifying advertising strategies, and building new facilities. Okay. S. Helto and J. Peter proposed a 5-stage model of the strategic implementation process. So number 1, determining how much the organization will have to change in order to implement the strategy under consideration. Number 2, analyzing the formal and informal structures of the organization. Number 3, analyzing the organizational culture of the organization and selecting an appropriate approach to implement such strategy. So this particular framework or model will be further elaborated and discussed in our next video. And lastly, implementing the strategic and evaluating results. So organizations successful at strategy implementation effectively manage six key supporting factors. So we have number 1, action planning. Number 2, organizational structure. Number 3, human resource. Number 4, the annual business plan. Number 5, monitoring and control. And number 6 are the linkage. So these particular 6 key frameworks or 6 supporting factors will further be discussed and elaborated in our next video. So that's it for today, and see you on our next video. Okay.